An NYTV membership is your inside track to the ultimate New York thoroughbred racing experience. Free race day entrance to Belmont, Saratoga, Aqueduct, and Finger Lakes. A liaison with NYS Breeding and Development Fund. A voice in Albany working with legislators to help support the New York breeding and racing industries. Along with tons of member benefits, discounts on services and publications, educational programs, and so much more. Join today at nytbreeders.org/membership.
The Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association invites you to be inspired. Breed in a place like no other. Prepare at world-class training centers. Race in the sunshine.
And they're off in the Dr. Figure.
Be inspired.
Here's number 7, we're in the 4,000,007.
And they're off.
100,000 is all, 5 million now. Once
Coming up the rail.
Opened up and won it by 7.
gonna give 8,200,000.
At the line, it'll be close.
5 million 2, 5 million 2.
The 3-year-old wins the stall.
1,200,000, 1,500,000. Everybody value, but
55.09 seconds for the first half mile.
round 2, everybody goes 6-2.
81st with a 16th to go.
500,000, that's 700.
Steady progress to nail them all on the wire. Photo finish for the win.
Okay, my name's Gary Falter with the Jockey Club. I'd just like to welcome everyone to today's online panel. And this is the 9th panel in our series of 10 online panels this year. And we have one more scheduled for December. In today's panel, we're going to talk about state incentives as it relates to racing and breeding in various states. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our sponsors. And I'm going to start with our presenting sponsors. Our presenting sponsors this year are the Green Group and Bessemer Trust and Stoll Keenan Ogden. So thank you very much to our presenting sponsors. And today our panel sponsors are the New York Thoroughbred Breeders Organization, the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, the Kentucky Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners, and the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners. So our thanks to the state organizations for sponsoring this panel today. And our Q&A sponsor, as we've had each time, is West Point Thoroughbreds. Thank you, West Point. And our sincere thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership. And you can see on the screen all the different sponsors for this year. And our thanks to them for helping us put on these webinars at no charge, as I've mentioned. There's no charge to our audience. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and I'm going to start off with Cricket Goodall. Welcome, Cricket. I think you're muted right now, so go ahead and unmute yourself, everybody. Hi, Cricket.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so Cricket is the executive director of the Maryland Thoroughbred Horse Breeders Association. Next, Chauncey Morris. Hi, Chauncey. And Chauncey, you're muted, so go ahead and unmute yourself. There you are.
Good afternoon.
Very good. Chauncey is the executive director of the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association and the Kentucky Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders. Next is Roger Heisman. Hi, Roger.
Hello, hi. Thanks for inviting us on.
Absolutely. So Roger is the executive director of the Louisiana Thoroughbred Breeders Association. And next is Steve Cook. Steve, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us, Gary.
And Steve is the Associate Vice President of Operations of the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners. And last but certainly not least is our friend Naja Thompson from New York. Hi, Naja.
Pleasure to be here, Gary.
And he is the Executive Director of the New York Thoroughbred Breeders Association. So we've got represented here Maryland and Kentucky, Louisiana, Florida, and New York. And I do want to say most of the racing states have their own associations. And on OwnerView, and I'm going to share this here real quick, we have all the various state programs listed on OwnerView, and I think you might be able to see the screen, and it's under the link incentives, and you'll see alphabetically Arkansas, California, Florida. So anybody that wants to view that information, it's available on OwnerView. Okay, so I'm going to come back to our screen here. So we got a lot of ground to cover. If you have a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll get to as many questions at the very end of the panel as we can get to as time allows, okay? So let's start off by talking about the trend in foal crops. And we'll talk about your respective states and ideas that you might want to share that maybe could help reverse some of these downward trends. I think everybody knows in the industry that the foal crop, it hung around the mid 30,000 for a long time. In fact, we even peaked at 50,000 back in the 80s. And now, it's trended down and it's been on this downward trend for some time now. So I've got another screen I want to share. So let me bring that up so we can look at the various states and where their foal crops are. So, okay, so the state foal crop counts. So if you look at this screen, in 1991, Kentucky had registered about 7,200 foals, which is about 19% of the foal crop. And in 2021, it actually had gone up to 7,900 foals registered, which was just under half of the foal crop. Looking at Florida, back in 1991, 3,816 foals, about 10% of the foal crop. And in 2021, 1,358 registered foals, or about 7.6% of the foal crop. In Maryland, in 1991, we had 1,709 registered foals. And these numbers coming right out of the Jockey Club Fact Book. So just so you know, it's an official source. That's 4.5% of the crop. And although it's dropped to 721, still about 4% of the foal crop from Maryland. Louisiana, 1,676 foals registered in 91, about 4.4%. And although it's dropped to 823, it's still 4.6% of the overall foal crop. And then in New York, 1,627 foals in 91 and about 4.3% of the foal crop. But as you can see in 2021, it's dropped, but the percent of the foal crop has actually gone up. So interesting numbers, interesting dynamics going on here. So what I'd like to do is just kind of take an opportunity to talk with the various representatives from the states about what are some of your best practices that you've implemented in your states that can help reverse some of these trends. Some things you've tried that have worked, and some things you've tried that just haven't worked very well. So why don't we start off with cricket in Maryland? I know it's been a downward trend, but what are some of the things that you're doing in Maryland to hopefully reverse some of this?
Well, I think that that those numbers are disturbing, to say the least, for all of us. I think to see what's happening with the national foal crop is very worrisome for all of us. So I think that what Maryland has tried, and we continue to try to offer different kinds of incentives and try to front load money to breeders as their horses make it to the track. So somehow incentivize. We have a developer bonus now, some things to try to get money back to the breeders more quickly. We have a substantial group of people who take advantage of the commercial market in Maryland, but we really want to encourage people to breed to race. That's what, when the Maryland Bred Fund was the first incentive fund of its kind in 1962, we can't live on history, but we're proud of that. And it was to incentivize people to do their business in Maryland and breed their own racehorses. So I think there's a combination of things going on with this, trend of foals. The cost of producing horses plus the commercial market. There's an awful lot of people taking advantage of that rather than racing their own horses. And we'd like to get back to that incentivize people to breed and race their own horses. But I think that everyone knows the cost is becoming prohibitive for people, and the lag time between, when your foal's born till it gets to the track is where we are needing to get some money back in people's pockets. And I'm not talking about the commercial option. That's for people that aren't using the commercial option to sell their weanlings or yearlings. Anyway, that's a long answer, but I think that, you got to get money back to people to produce these horses, because more and more people are not willing to take that on that cost of, $50,000 to $80,000 to produce a racehorse.
Right. All right, Chauncey in Kentucky, you're the one state that looks like things are still on the upswing. Talk about some of the things you've done in Kentucky we all know Kentucky's Kentucky, and it's the horse capital, but for thoroughbreds, what are you doing there that can help maintain this full crop?
Kentucky, frankly, wasn't always Kentucky. I think that one of the things, it's no mystery that the racing circuit here has become the most valuable in the United States. It's the richest in the United States. That's where we put so much of our efforts in becoming. And if you go back 2 decades before, Kentucky was really more of a flyover country between larger states, California, New York, Florida during the wintertime. And what we've endeavored to do is create a year-round racing circuit here that we're giving $197 million of purses away. It's the base purse and then combined $48 million in KTDF money. We've always operated on a principle of unrestricted racing here. We think that as the primary breeding state, which frankly we always have been, but if you go back, I'd say 2 to 3 decades before, we had a lot of competition from a lot of states that has served us very, very well in a lot of ways, in a lot of philosophical ways, but moreover that we're able to draw upon inventory. It doesn't matter where it is, just as long as you can put out a positive racing product and get your horsemen and owners attracted to it, then everything else takes care of itself.
Okay. Naja, how about New York? What things are going on in New York that hopefully can reverse some of these downward trends?
Sure. As a regional breeding market, we try to manage that duality, as Cricket spoke to, between commercial breeders and trying to find those who want to breed to race. So we've implemented measures to try to make it easier to bring mares into the state, especially from November breeding stock sales. We just implemented a rule about 1.5 years ago that any mare in foal purchased for $50,000 or more at public auction and returns to New York State within 15 days post sale has the ability to qualify as a resident mare, and therefore you're able to breed the next season anywhere in North America, and your first fall and second fall would qualify for New York Bred Awards. And as well, of course, working with New York Racing Association and Finger Lakes, trying to identify bonuses. We have a 10-race Stallion Stakes series, so that we're also trying to work to manage to develop our in-state sire business and making sure we're able to put more foals on the ground, but certainly a challenge. And we're trying our best to incentivize everybody to satisfy the commercial market, as well as local farms and breeders and owners to breed to race as well.
Okay. Roger, what things are going on in Louisiana that can help reverse some of those trends?
Well, I agree with Chauncey quite a bit. I think most of this begins with racing. And what has hurt our industry to a great degree is that, think back to when we were kids. Luckily, my father was a trainer and my grandfather was in the business and whatnot. So I was able to go to the track, and I developed that love for the horse and for the game at an early age. But you go to most of these states, you weren't able to do so. You weren't allowed on the track till you were 21 or till you were to an age of what they considered maturity at that time. So in today's world, you got people becoming fans of basketball, football, baseball, everything else before they even get a shot to look at horse racing. And I think that has hurt us quite a bit. Naturally, the monies that Kentucky has right now to give away is ungodly. And, you have $100,000 maiden races. Here in Louisiana, we're running for about 75. We were just able to bring HR in to a degree. We're still have a few lawsuits we're trying to get around, but all the HR money here doesn't go strictly to Louisiana breds. It goes to all of racing. So they're trying to help the purses of all breeds here in the state of Louisiana, which was kind of something we didn't push for and weren't looking for, but that's what we got. And I think that we here in Louisiana, we changed our rules 5 times in the last 5 years. trying to what determined an accredited Louisiana bred, how you can get a Louisiana bred accredited. We opened it up to you could breed out every state. We kept it to where you could breed if you were in Mississippi, Arkansas, or Texas. You could, as long as you bred to a Louisiana stallion, you only had to spend a certain amount of time here. And we've juggled those rules and played with them for the last like I said, probably 5 times in the last 5 years. We've changed them. Nothing has really helped us jump that spot. And another problem we're always facing, some of the tracks are doing so well now. A $5,000 horse runs for a $20,000 pot. Well, if that's the case, why are you going to go buy a baby when you can run for a purse 4 times its worth first time you run this horse a week later, as opposed to, a year later after you got 25,000 into this horse? And that's another thing we're working on, trying to get those purses adjusted to where a maiden special weight or a maiden claimer at a certain level gets a higher purse than that $5,000 claimer at the bottom.
Okay. All right, Steve, tell us about Florida. What things are going on in Florida that will help reverse some of those foaling trends?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It turns out to be a bit of an advantage to go last on this because I'm able to kind of take everybody's ideas and sweep it up into a big pile here and capitalize. But I love some things that Chauncey and Cricket said. Cricket hit on the breed to race. I think that's a critical forward path that we're going to have to work on. And I love in Kentucky. Full disclosure, I grew up in Kentucky. It's my homeland, so I'm kind of familiar with these things. I love in Kentucky that there's a deep emphasis on open racing, and that's something the FTBOA Florida breeders really, really believe in. Is we've got to have an open race product. So we have restricted races at the tracks down here, but our incentives are very heavily targeted towards the open race horse and making sure our horses that come out of Florida can race against anyone, anytime, anywhere. And we've been really successful in that. The other thing, going all the way back to Cricket, that really where our biggest thing we can do and accomplish in Florida is achieving certainty. Certainty is everything to someone looking to breed a horse. You're not going to breed a horse if you don't know you're going to get that ROI in 3 to 4 years. And how do we get that certainty? Well, one, you've got to have the healthy racetracks. We've all hit on that, and that's the obvious first point. But in addition to that, you have to be building out for the future of the industry as the nature of wagering evolves, the nature of our revenue streams evolve. You got to be poising your association to have growing incentives from multiple sources to give these breeders that certainty. We do it, and every one of you will be able to nod your head. We do it by being super active at the state capitol and very active in communities and very active with government action. And that's proved beneficial. I have no doubt we'll talk about how our incentives have grown in Florida overnight down here because of legislative action and wins. That if we can build that certainty, and I think Florida's on the ascent, it's on the hard rise because of that. You'll see in the next couple of years, that's going to go a long way to really turning that horse supply, that full supply around.
Okay. Well, you guys are echoing a message that came out a few months ago when we had a panel on the economics of our sport. And one of the things that came out of that was the need to have more breed to race breeders and owners out there, that there's plenty of breed for the commercial market, but we seem to be lacking, it seems, in the breed to race arena. And this is the second panel that has indicated that. So I find that interesting that you're kind of going down the same path that panel did a few months ago. So what I'd like to do is kind of go state by state here and just have you guys talk about your programs. I'm going to start with Chauncey with the Kentucky program. You guys, breed more foals out of Kentucky than any other state. So talk about the incentives as it relates to an owner who owns a racehorse racing in Kentucky or racing a Kentucky bred, and along with that from a breeder's incentive, Chauncey, because you didn't always have breeders awards in Kentucky and now you do.
No, we didn't. That's right. Okay. So Your first question has to do with owners. So I mentioned the $197 million purses collectively. Here in Kentucky, we have a supplemental purse structure called the Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund. It was started in 1978. It is for horses that are by Kentucky stallions that stood the stallion season here in Kentucky and foaled in Kentucky. They can race for extra purses. So if you were to have a base purse of, well, generally speaking, the average now with historical horse racing is on every race, $26,000 is available as a supplement for the KTDF registered horses. Last year, we paid out $48 million in KTDF money. We offered, and this is really important, we offered $54 million in KTDF funds across every condition, even some designated claiming races now. And the reason that we have a whatever overage shortfall, whichever way that you want to call it, is because of that open racing philosophy. We want the best Florida breds and British breds and Maryland breds to come here to Kentucky and win. And a lot of folks have the assumption with historical horse racing that it's just generating the Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund. That's not true. In each of the contracts that we have with the 5 flat tracks, each of the tracks generate either 14 to 14.5% net commission off of historical horse racing to base association purses. So you can be a Louisiana bred, New York bred, Maryland bred, New York bred, and you're eligible for that base purse. You asked me questions related to the Kentucky Breeders Incentive Fund, and I don't want to tell you wrong. We are the registrar for the KTDF. I can talk everything about KTDF. The Kentucky Breeders Incentive Fund, it was created back in the mid-2000s. It has always been run by the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, now the Kentucky Horse Racing and Gaming Corporation. Last year to thoroughbreds, they paid out $16.2 million in Breeders' Awards. Those Breeders' Awards ranged from let's say $3,500 to there is a $50,000 component on breeding the Derby win.
Okay.
So those funds are generated off of the 6% sales tax on stud fees, which is primarily generated 99% by thoroughbred horses here. The stallions that are standing in Kentucky, it is then rebated back to the industry in the form of the Breeders' Incentive Fund. Very similar to Louisiana, our Breeders' Incentive Fund does not only pay for flat horses, it pays for all breeds. So we thoroughbreds are generating all of the money, and it's getting then parceled out mostly to thoroughbreds, then to standardbreds, and then to all breeds, not only racing breeds, but also pleasure horses, sport horses as well. There's another component, a 0.5 to 1%, that's in our contracts with the racetracks that KBIF is also generated as a gift to the Commonwealth of Kentucky from HHR.
Okay, so I think you've answered my next question was how do you fund all these incentive programs? So it sounds like there's a tax on stud fees. What about
there's the tax for stud fees plus 0.5 to 1% of gross net commissions from HHR, and on KTDF, the entire parimutuel tax. You can be on track, inter-track wagering, and historical horse racing. 1.5% is the parimutuel tax. 0.75% is directed to the Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund.
Okay, very good. All right. Let's move on to cricket. Cricket. So talk about the Maryland incentives for owners and breeders and what people can expect there.
Well, we have most of the same incentives as every other state. We don't have a total amount of incentive fund money that's probably comparable to anybody else on the call. We do not have historical horse racing. We don't get any money from or significant money from sports wagering, or iGaming has not passed in Maryland. So but we have breeder bonuses, stallion bonuses, owner bonuses, developer bonuses. That's the newest one to try to encourage money that would stay with a horse even if it gets sold or claimed. We have our stallion program, race program is Maryland Million, which has not, we still have $1 million. We'd love to have grown that and that be our Sire Stakes series. That's not funded. A tiny portion is funded by the Maryland Bred Fund, but not much. Most of the money.
Didn't Jim McKay have a lot to do with the Maryland Million?
He did.
Yeah, I thought so.
He's the one who came back from the first Breeders' Cup and said, let's do this here. And we did. At that point, most of the other incentive programs were sire based. They've now changed to breds because it's hard to raise money for a sire based program. And we found money in other places legislatively than using all of our incentive money. So a portion of the bonuses are paid out by the Maryland horse breeders. The breeder portion, the owner portion, and the developer come out of the purse account. So we work cooperatively, and we have about a little over 15 million that goes to those awards. That's not, it's hard to keep up with, the other states on this call. I believe everybody except maybe Florida has historical horse racing, if I'm correct. But anyway, we need another source of revenue. And so a couple things going on in Maryland. Obviously, certainty is a big question here right now. We have a very optimistic view of the future. We're now transitioning to having the state of Maryland as our partner in the industry. So we're in uncharted territory as far as that's concerned. Having a state take ownership of everything related to the Preakness and committing to build a new facility at Pimlico, which we have every reason to believe is going to boost our industry significantly. That being said, we're probably not going to have as many live race days as we have in the past. Historically, we've been racing about 187 days a year. That's going to significantly decrease, but we are going to coordinate with the surrounding states. That's an advantage of Maryland, that we can be a regional product and that we will coordinate with Virginia, Pennsylvania, not Pennsylvania as much as we hope, but Delaware, New Jersey to some extent, so that people have a chance to run. They aren't going to be able to run as many days here. And we are working on a plan to have out-of-state incentives for Maryland breds if there is no live racing here. That the details are to be determined because we'll have to decide exactly where and exactly percentages, et cetera. But I think that's a necessary part of our future to be able to keep people breeding horses here. So I think that there's a lot going on in Maryland that has a very positive upside potential. However, in the meantime, until the new Pimlico is supposed to be unveiled in 2027, we've got a time of trying to keep people breeding horses for the next couple of years so that we will have a very competent supply of Maryland breds to fill the races. Going back to a couple of people's comments, you've got to have a product, because if your product is substantial, not going to cut it, then your handle goes down, and the handle numbers already is, I don't know if we're headed there, but the handle numbers across the country are pretty disturbing, I think. And and that's, I believe, completely product related and competition. I'm sorry, probably competition from other kinds of games. But so we're challenged right now.
Well, you make an interesting point about the new Pimlico. We had a panel again a couple of months ago on international racing and buying, and the panel talked about how in foreign racetracks, how they've upgraded their facilities by building all new or just doing complete overhauls, and what a tremendous difference that's made in getting more fans to come to the races and also owners into the game. And I know, Keeneland's going through some, changes there. Belmont, obviously, down in Florida, you got Gulfstream Park. Churchill's done some things. Pimlico, I'm not sure if anything planned down in Louisiana, Roger, but that panel talked about how the upgraded facilities are just getting so many more fans and clientele.
The experiences become key. You have to have the
Yeah.
product once they get there, but if they are not going to a facility that's up to their expectations, I mean, you can tell with what Kentucky and New York are doing. They're both, significantly investing in the actual physical facilities. And we in Maryland haven't done that for many, many years and we're now in a position where it's absolutely necessary. Can it be done quickly enough to really revive and have a real boost to the industry? We believe it can, but it's, it remains to be seen. It's a heavy lift. And having the state, again, as your partner, the state doesn't really, I don't think they've been used to making the decisions of investing in the industry. Certainly we get to the legislature and we get a lot of support through slots or VLTs in various ways, but they weren't in charge, the state. They were like, here's the money, you guys. Now we've got the state, significantly involved in this process, which is going to be interesting to say the least.
Well, you've used a term a couple of times that I'm going to ask you to kind of define what it is. Developer. I've not heard that term before. Maybe the other guys in the other states have something similar. What is that term
basically
explaining?
a developer bonus applies to the people, first person who races a horse in Maryland that they developed. Hopefully that's breed to race, but it could also be somebody who buys a yearling at a sale, but its first start is in Maryland. So if that horse gets claimed out of the next race, then the owner bonus that normally would be 30% is going to be split, and 15% of that developer bonus stays with that developer, the first person who raced it in Maryland, no matter where the horse is. So basically it's going back to my point of trying to encourage people to put all the money in early to get the horse to the races. So
is that something new?
We started it about a year, maybe a little over a year ago, and I think Pennsylvania copied it. I don't think the other states have.
I'm just going to go around the horn. Any other states do something similar?
I'll give Sal Sinatra a little shout out. When he was here, we were brainstorming about how do we get, people to stay in this business. And, if they race their horse for the first time and it gets claimed, or something like that. So he came up with a sort of scope. The horsemen embraced it, and it's been popular.
Okay. Well, Tom Rooney made a point about that during I think our economics of the sport, how he'll breed a horse and get it to the races, and it may have to drop into maiden claiming 50 and it gets claimed, and he says, then I'm out, I'm done with it, I've got all this time and effort in it. So I wonder if that
and that's that puts a really bad taste in people's mouth, of course. And not only financially, but if they're emotionally attached to the horse. So I think we need to find more ways to get that kind of money back, as I said, in the production of the horse, so that people aren't on the hook for that. So that's a little way to help, but I think we need some big ideas, new ideas, and we're always exploring that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think one of the benefits of having a panel like this is just sharing ideas and brainstorming and best practices. Great. Okay, so thanks, Cricket. Let's move on to Naja in New York. So, New York racing, that's some of the best racing in North America. Daily average purses over $1 million at Saratoga, 800,000 at Belmont. So, talk about the incentives that you have there in New York for racehorse ownership and for breeding.
Definitely, Gary. As Steve mentioned earlier, I think the most important aspect for each of our respective jurisdictions is having that great relationship with our state legislatures. And we do that here in New York. About 55% or more of my time is spent in Albany, lobbying and talking to elected officials. And the results of that, which you have mentioned in the help that we've been giving through person enrichments, not only from the New York State Breeding Fund, but as well money that's brought in from the VLT machines that we have at Aqueduct and Finger Lakes, which we were able to get installed in 2004 in Finger Lakes and 2011 with Aqueduct. That contributes to purses, and as well also funds our breeding development program and incentives and awards, which we do have our breeder awards, stallion owner awards, and for owners we have open owner awards, which is an award up to 20% of purse money owned for New York breds, and each of our awards are for registered New York breds. And the open owner awards are for those New York breds who compete in open company races for a minimum claim price of 30%, finishing first to third. If you are sired by a New York sire, you're able to get 20% of purse earnings, capped up to $20,000. And if you're a non-New York sire, you're also able to get 10% of purse money earned for first through third. With that being said, we also have purse enrichments for owners. So I think Chauncey talked about earlier here in New York, we try to incentivize and encourage our New York breds to also run an open company. And I think it's important as we develop our programs. And I think everybody has mentioned that, of course, we do have our restricted race program, but we want to see our horses develop and compete on the biggest and highest stages, such as the Breeders' Cups or any of our respective Triple Crown races. And of course, the great winter racing that we have down in Louisiana as well. So with that being said, our breeder awards are 40% for first place if you're sired by a New York sire, 20% if you're sired by a non-New York sire, that's for first place. And it kind of staggers down to 40, 20, 10 for New York sired and 20, 10, 5 if you're non-New York sired. With that being said, we also receive a percentage of our funding through ADW mechanisms, on track and off track handle. And what we're building in New York, you referenced the Belmont Park redevelopment project earlier, is definitely getting that investment back in the industry. But as Cricket and others have mentioned, we do have to protect our breeders and our small farm owners, our regional people who want to compete and be a part of our game, and to make sure that the first time that they run at the track, if they do breed a race, that the horse is not being claimed, because that definitely leaves a sour mouth. And I've gotten those phone calls, and I'm sure others on this line have as well. So we're just trying to do our best to ensure that we develop our horse and, of course, our foal crop, and that we can matriculate horses from our restricted races into open company.
Okay, so you mentioned restricted races. So you have restricted races. Are they strictly for stakes, or do you have restricted races for maiden and other levels?
For the entire race program, from overnight races to stakes races, in total, about averaging 525 restricted races in New York every year. Of course, that includes our restricted New York Stakes races, which in total purses is around 10 million. And it's a very lucrative program. I'm sure everybody is aware, between Finger Lakes and Western New York and the New York Racing Association circuit. Certainly plenty of opportunities to make sure that the horses that breed and fold in New York are able to compete at various levels and have that ability to move forward, whether it's through maiden, non-winners of one, non-winners of two, and then still keeping your eligibility and running it open on that other side as well, and then matriculating to the stakes program as well.
So do you play breeders awards outside of New York racing, or is it strictly within the state of New York?
We do not. It's strictly limited to racing that is competing and run in New York State. And that's, of course, due to the lobbying efforts that we've been able to have. And we've been exploring other opportunities to expand that. Personally, I'd love to see if we were able to give an award for grade one winners outside of the state of New York, because I think that gives rightful promotion to each of our respective programs. But as of right now, our programs and awards are strictly based for horses that run and compete in New York State.
Okay. And Chauncey, let me jump back to you. I'm pretty sure in Kentucky, you do pay breeders awards outside of Kentucky. Is that correct?
We do. So I'd be remiss. I got educated on this with Drew Connors this morning. So currently it's $3,500 race for winning any allowance or maiden special weight anywhere in the United States or at Woodbine. Over $4,000 for winning a non-graded stake anywhere in the United States or Woodbine. $5,000 for winning a grade 2 or 3 anywhere in the United States or Group 2 and 3 in Canada, England, France, or Ireland, Republic of Ireland. $7,500 a race for winning a Grade 1 stakes anywhere in the United States, a Group 1 race held in Canada, England, France, Ireland, or a Group 1 race held on Dubai World Cup Day, Japan Cup Day, or Hong Kong international races. Then $50,000 for winning Kentucky Oaks or the Kentucky Derby. And then finally, $200,000. Now it's over $200,000 because of those HHR gifts allocated to the top 20 claiming horses in Kentucky with the most claiming wins. And all of these, of course, to the breeder. Just say something about this, that this association, when the Breeders' Incentive Fund was created, there was a lot of, as I said, Kentucky racing wasn't always the lodestar. That was really New York, Florida, California. And we knew that we had to make a couple of decisions, I'd say the past 20 years, as we started advocating for ourselves. The first one was we always wanted open company. Second one was because we are an exporter state, not only to the 35 thoroughbred racing states in the United States, but also over 50 countries out of the 69 countries that have thoroughbred racing all across the world. We have an international product that we wanted to be able to if we were going to do Breeders' Awards, it couldn't have just been an in-state affair. And so, as our industry loves to do, we started to fight with each other and ultimately prevailed on what I just told you are the breeders' incentives that are payable not only beyond North America, but in the Part 1 countries of the International Cataloging Standards or the Blue Book, whatever you want to call it. So those are hugely important. We think that those are things that serve us well, that as the jurisdictions have contracted, not only in the United States, but also I think around the world, that Adam Smith invisible hand is able to say, all right, you don't have restrictions, and this is what happens to your tail of production.
Okay, very good.
Gary, I feel compelled to jump on that if you don't mind.
Sure, I was about to jump over to you next, Steve, but go ahead.
Okay, all right. So, out-of-state incentives is probably something every jurisdiction wants to do. I mean, they work in Kentucky. I think Roger's got out-of-state stakes winners options in Louisiana. He can correct me in a moment, but I'm pretty sure they have some out-of-state incentives. There are some other states that have out-of-state incentives. You know, I think a lot of people want them. It's economics works. And but a lot of states too, you have statutory constraints, and that's what you're going to run into in a lot of locations. Is way back when that industry and that program was set up, there were whatever interests that said, well, yeah, but we really need to, benefit the in-state thing, and so that's where we're sitting today. But it's certainly always something that these states probably are targeting.
Sure, understood. Yeah. Well, Steve, why don't you talk about the Florida incentives for owners and breeders, if you could?
Yeah, thanks. So Florida is in a great place right now. In the last couple of years, our state has seen fit to direct inject something called House Bill 7073, unleashed 33.5, actually more than that, $1 million per year on an ongoing basis. That's going to enable us to, going forward, more than double our incentives. And we'll see the industry at large will see a real spike, or they've been watching a real spike from 23 to 24. The chart just goes straight to the sky as we've been able to double down on all of our incentives. Historically, well, let me put it like this. Our Breeders' Awards through this year from last year are going to be up 52%. Our racing incentives are up over 66%. I mean, we're talking step function change. And so we're able to put a lot of money out there in a thoughtful fashion. Another advantage we have in Florida that people don't take a lot of time to notice is that the Breeders' Awards, the racing incentives, it all comes through one association. Some of states, the Breeders' Awards are over at the Racing Commission. The racing incentives are in another
Right.
place, and so it's a little. I'm not saying they can't think and act holistically, but it's a little more complicated. We're very lucky to have TBOA to think about the whole program holistically, work with the racetracks, and always keeping an eye to the first imperative with us is the breeders first, right? That's where you get the foals in the fields that reward the state back for all that support. So we're able to approach it holistically. We've been able to drive up the breeders awards and the racing incentives, those magnificent percentages. Today we're at breeders awards are 20% of announced gross purse, which actually that's a useful subtlety. Let me comment on that. I can't guess how these things come about when they were set up long before my time, but announced gross purse, a lot of states you might have a percent of earned purse. In our case, if you finish 1, 2, 3 in a race, let's say it's a $100,000 race, that's $20,000, 20% of 100, not 20% of earned, right? So 1, 2, 3 is split up for a total of 20% for the breeders. The stallions, you have to win a black type for 20%. And then the racing incentives, of course, are kind of sprinkled out in artful ways. Like at Gulfstream, we make sure that if you win a stake at Gulfstream, there's $20,000 there to be spread across the top 3. Every stake at Gulfstream, Tampa Bay going into this year, every stake at Tampa Bay has 25,000 and/or 50,000 in it for the Florida breds. In the overnights. Last year, we were able to work a partnership with Tampa Bay, and this was really successful. We're proud of this. We're able to commingle some resources at Tampa and add $18,000 to every maiden special weight and allowance overnight. And boy, did that put extra horses in the gates, in the starting gate. It was very visible result from that. We're able to continue that again. And similarly at Gulfstream, but not so much in partnership, it's FTBOA unilaterally is adding some $5,000 incentives to the allowance and maiden special weight overnights. And then there's something called the Florida Bred Incentive Fund and the Florida Owners Awards, adding each about $5,000 to a pretty broad basis of overnight races. So the owners' incentives are there. In 2023, our total incentives program, including all in FTBOA and the Florida Owners Awards and all the different programs for Florida breds, added up to $14 million. In 2024, we're offering about $20 million, and it should go up a bit from there. And it's allowed Florida to arrive at a really cool position. And this wasn't easy to analyze, but we believe that if you combine our Breeders' Awards, our Stallion Awards, and our open race incentives, and I apologize, this is for all states outside Kentucky. Kentucky's going to be our target, Chauncey. We're always going to try to catch up to Kentucky because you guys are killing it, obviously. But for all states outside Kentucky, that package of programs is adding up to more than any other state. And that's huge. It makes us really excited because I think we're going to see a visible uptick in the business we're doing. If you talk about how to grow a full crop, that's probably how you do it, that you're creating certainty when you're able to inject those significant dollars. And ultimately, I have to thank our legislators, our community. They see our economic value, they see our economic progress, they believe in us, and they've invested in us, and we're committed to paying them back for that.
Okay. And now you don't have restricted racing in Florida, but you do have the Florida Sire Stakes program. Is that correct?
We emphasize open racing. We're really about the open racehorse. We've talked about that, but we do have restricted racing. Gulfstream's got some maiden special weight. They've got some maiden optional claiming conditions that favor the Florida breds. We've got some really nice stakes races throughout the year. The Sunshine Million still exists at Gulfstream. So there's definitely some robust restricted stakes racing. And don't forget too, we do have our Florida Sire Stakes program, where there's a 3-race series, or actually it's 6 races. There's 3 races for boys, 3 races for girls, both 2-year-olds in the fall of the year. that add up to a $1.2 million.
Okay.
And those meant some pretty fancy horses. Like you saw Ben Tornado come in second the other day in the sprint at the Breeders' Cup. He was a product of that race, and rated by Merit is coming out of those races. You'll see him on the Derby Trail, I hope, next spring. He's got the highest buyer figure, I think, so far this year for a 2-year-old. So we've got our restricted races. It's not a wall-to-wall program like some other states, but it's robust enough that there's a lot to compete for there.
Okay, great. Roger, you've been patiently awaiting, so I'm going to jump over to Louisiana. So at one time, Louisiana, maybe you still do, you played first, second, and third place Breeders' Awards worldwide. Does Louisiana still do that?
That is correct. We do. If we find out of a horse, in fact, I have 2 sitting on my desk right here, one from Saudi Arabia and one from Dubai. We'll be paying Breeders' Awards on. Those Breeders' Awards, if they're a stake race, they're paid just like a stake in the state. If they're just a regular race, an overnight race, they're paid in the group of all that we put money aside to pay that Breeders' Awards.
Okay, because as you remember, I had a Louisiana bred once. I went
Running
to
in
Korea,
Yeah.
and I got a Breeders' Award check 4 years in a row.
I remember you
from
called me,
horse
what
running
was this?
So,
Yes, we know about it. Now,
Right.
we have changed those rules to a degree that it's very hard for me to follow all the horses running all over the world. So basically, we require the breeder now to notify me before the end of the year of a horse running elsewhere. That way I know I can go look through some sort, because you can't always get it from the jockey club. You might have to call. I've called Japan to try to find out about a horse. So yes.
So talk about the owner incentives and the breeder incentives in a little more detail, and what your restricted program looks like there in Louisiana.
Well, we're currently paying 25% Breeders' Awards to a horse that is by a Louisiana stallion, and 20% to a horse who is by an out-of-state stallion. And we also have another program called, well, over the last few years, we've changed our rules several times. We had a Z horse, where if you bred, say you bred to Justify this year and More Than Ready next year, that would be a Z horse. You would only be eligible for a 9% Breeders' Awards, which at that time was 18, making it 9. Like I said, these rules have changed over the last few years. So keeping track of this has gotten to be like some type of game. But 25 and 20, and then if you're one of the neighboring states and you come over here and breed to our stallion, you stay here 6 months and then go back, say, to Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, or whatnot, we will pay you a 10% Breeders' Award on every horse after the first one. The first one can be by an out-of-state stallion, to which you'll get that 10%, that 9%, and if you're by the Louisiana stallion, you get a 10%. We pay stallion awards, we pay Breeders' Awards, we have purse incentives. Our stake races in this year, 24, right at $6 million. Basically, we have 67 stakes running for 5.71 million, and of the 67, 33 will offer a purse of 100,000 or more. We pay awards out to horses that win open races. Last year in 23, we paid right about 1.4 million. The year before that was 1.5. It has gone down a little bit because we've had more influx of horses from out of state come in, and they're beating the Louisiana breds more so in the open races. In 2023, in purses and additional purse awards and Breeders' Awards payment and stallion awards, we paid out a little over $28 million to the breeders and whatnot here in the state. We operate, about 91% of every dollar comes into us, goes back to the breeders, and we're proud of that. We're lucky enough that our legislature, everyone in the legislature pretty much is related to someone who's in the horse racing game, because horse racing here in Louisiana, it's not a business, it's not a hobby, it's a way of life for much.
Well, that's a plus.
Yeah.
And we've had great horsemen, great riders, and all come from Louisiana because they start at such a young age. And because of that, the state understands that as well. They understand that when The lottery came in, our handle dropped 12 to 14%. They understood when slots came in, our handle was going to drop. When video poker came in, our handle was going to drop. So we're getting the percentage of each one of those. The historic racing machines just started. Where, you know, we had 1/4 of that last year, which didn't produce that much because they're not they're not all over yet because we're dealing with a few lawsuits with truck stops and whatnot who prefer the video poker. So we're striving to improve everything that we can do. We have a sale, we have a magazine that we put out. We dropped the magazine down to quarterly because print really isn't working as it once did. And like I said, if it wasn't for the legislature, the governor, the lieutenant governor, they're all horse racing fans. And as most of y'all know, it's our governor who is fighting HISA. So you know, we're proud of that as well. So, you know, we just we do everything we can to help the breeders in our state. And that's another reason why for the Worldwide Breeders Awards, I mean, you send a horse to sale, you don't know who's going to buy it, you know. Right. So we want our breeders to be compensated in some type of way.
Okay. So it's about almost 3 o'clock. I've got a couple more questions for all of you, and then we're going to go to the Q&A. I just want to remind the audience, if you have a question for any of the panelists, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those in a couple of minutes. So question for all of you to think about. So the pie of owners and breeders is only so large. And you know, it's hard to attract a breeder from this state to go to this state and an owner to race here to race here. How do we grow the pie? How do we take a pie that's this large and grow it to this large by attracting people who are not in horse racing ownership and breeding, international people that would invest in our horses? So what are your thoughts on that? And are you doing anything in your state to help grow that pie, and especially from an international perspective? Chauncey, what are your thoughts on that?
I politely disagree with your premise. I don't believe that dollars in markets are ever finite. I think that a couple things. If you look, we get focused, I think, on breeding in this industry. It's not a knock to the Jockey Club. You're the stud book. Racing is what makes everything go. That is why New York, Stephen just said something that was hugely important. We're the target, right? That's good. We're built on a sport that is about competition. New York was the king. Right now, we're holding the crown. That'll change at some point. Florida has also been there. Maryland has always had an extraordinary culture for this, and it is very difficult to predict when a new racehorse owner at any level is going to come into the game. And then whenever they do, then you try to explain it away. Oh, well, that happened because of X. That happened because of Y. As far as the foal crop is concerned, markets react to demand. I think that a lot of people, because we're living in the United States right now in 2024, we're in this moment where you don't know what's good news, bad news, fake news, but you know what the metrics are on the Saratoga sale. You know what the metrics have been on the September yearling sale. They've been increasing. There is demand there. There are lots of reasons for breeders to actually want to breed their brood mares. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that specifically here in Kentucky, but not only Kentucky, that there are long-term, long-range plans, especially in the eastern part of the United States, that are trying to improve our product from an infrastructure perspective, from a purse perspective, that there's a lot of reasons why an investor should want to get involved in our game. And then finally, the last question that you said, yeah, here in Kentucky, because we're the leading exporter in the United States, we've always been engaged and helped fund foreign market development activities. we've seen in the past 20 years, people that just started coming to buy yearlings in places like Brazil, Mexico, Chile, North Korea, Azerbaijan, they finally said, oh, I think I want to actually buy a farm here in Kentucky, race here in Kentucky. We go through these ebbs and flows in Europe when our horses aren't doing well, and we kind of look inwardly, well, why aren't our horses doing well? And then you have a stallion like Justify, who throws all these fantastic runners. Now horses are doing well again. Now there's lots of reasons for bloodstock agents from Ireland, the United Kingdom, France to come and buy our horses again. And we try to perform as much advertising as we can in Europe and the rest of the world, and send people overseas. And the other thing that I would say, I don't want to use up anyone's time, but everyone here is talking about using their funds that they have, that they are the custodians of, with a bit more latitude. That's something that we've also done here. KTDF, we reimbursed the tracks to the tune of $700,000 last year for the tracks on using their KTDF allotment on marketing that was targeted at horse player and horseman equally. That's something that's hugely important, that keeps our sport top of mind, that keeps our circuit top of mind. That's how we're going to turn things around. And we'll find out it by the end of the breeding stock sales.
Can I jump in just for a second there?
You
I
sure
agree
may, yes.
so strongly with the marketing part. That's what's lost in a lot of places, including here in Maryland. We have a lot of money being devoted to redoing Pimlico, but marketing is missing. And I think that correlates pretty directly, and I'd love to hear from everybody about the handle. I mean, when you look at the handle numbers and why is our product, why is horse racing not appealing to anybody anymore? Is it, just an oversaturation of other options, but I think marketing is part of it. I think trying to appeal to different audiences, and as Chauncey said, it is what drives the sport. I mean, bettors, we need breeders, don't get me wrong, but I do think without the handle being consistent and looking competitive, we're all not struggling, but certainly trying to address that.
I agree, if I can jump in myself. I think the biggest thing we have to do in order to become a breeder, you first have to be interested in the horses. And to do that, you have to go to the races. That is the big problem. You look at everybody's racetracks now, you do a pan shot, there's nobody at the races. And nothing is better than feel, touch, smell, and whatnot. Every time I bring someone new to the races, the first thing I do is bring them to the paddock. And they say, well, why are we going to the paddock? I said, because that's where everything starts and begins. That's where the horses are coming. Everybody thinks they can win at that point for the most part. And that's before the desperation or the bad feeling afterwards. And then you bring them down, listen to them run across the track and hear them break from the gate. I mean, that's a passion that has to be learned. That's not a passion that you're going to get watching it at home on TV. You got to get them to the racetrack. One of the things that we've started doing down here, we give Scott we have 4 championship days. We have Louisiana Champions Night, we have Champions Day, we have Premier Night, we have Gold Cup, and we have, I'm missing one, Legends Night. And each one of those are a full day of Louisiana bred racing. We give away scholarships on those days. And what I make the kids do, I make them sign up before the first race even happens, and we don't pull the results till after the 5th. That way they have to be here in person. So they have to stay at the races for 5 races. They have to go to the paddock. They have to either that or they got nothing else to do unless they invest their time in looking at these beautiful animals, smelling them, hopefully touching the pony, the outrider's pony or whatnot, and developing a sense of want and need to see this again and again and again. And once they start coming again and again and again, eventually they become interested in the sport rather than not. And then hopefully they get into the sport. And I think another thing that has to be done too, that I really don't like about the racetracks is the racetracks push these super trainers. Not that they're not bad trainers. Don't get me wrong. But every time you put in if you put in for 20, 25 stalls, you're going to be cut to 15 stalls. You're going to be cut to 17 stalls. And guess where those horses walk? They walk right across the street into a super trainer's barn, and they stay there until he sends them to his second string, of which, and the whole time, they're getting rid of people in the sport that people would be attached to that can afford possibly to give them horses to train. Not everybody can afford $125 or $130 a day. You know, there's some guys down here in Louisiana getting 70. I don't know how they're making it, but they are. But they're slowly being squeezed out by the racetracks. And if they're squeezed out, before long, we're just going to have those with and nobody below them. And I think that in turn will turn to the breeding shed. You won't need as many horses when you got nothing but the best running against the best, and you got nowhere to go with the ones that aren't the best.
Okay.
So Gary,
Chauncey made a great point that, you know, there's a lot of good, compelling reasons for people to get into ownership. And even in our economics of the sport, that was talked about a lot of good reasons for people to get into the business and ownership. But how do we grow this pie? Steve, what were you going to say?
Yeah, there's so many thoughts out there. I'll hard to choose where to start. I mean, there's an awful lot that Chauncey said I agree with. You know, we don't need to be breeding horses just for the sake of breeding horses.
Right.
It's okay for a little bit of right. I think there's some consolidation still to come for this industry, but as long as when we're good, we're very good. And I'm going to propose that when we're good, we're very good. I've been to the Kentucky Derby. I've been to Breeders' Cup. I've been to Gulfstream on all kinds of different race days. You know, we got some major assets in the sport, and it does pull people in. And sometimes you get an owner who drops in, actually frequently. We have owners drop into our lap because they experience racing in those very good moments. Take the Nationals pitcher, Jason Worth. All of a sudden, we run into him in the winter circle at Gulfstream when he wins one of our FSS races, and away he goes with Dornoch and obviously, since I bring him up, the other horses are going to slip my mind. And he's on the national scene at the what was it, the Belmont, and I saw him on TV this weekend at the Breeders' Cup. You know, these people are out there and they want in. We just, you know, we got to be very good when we are good, and we really do that. And you know, we score. Those of you that have been to Ocala, and those that have been in Kentucky, the land in these places is stunningly beautiful. And the experience, I'll speak for Ocala specifically because I'm here, the experience is available in Ocala for someone who has a natural inclination to be drawn to the horse. It's like a magnet. It brings these people in. Woodford Thoroughbreds, a 1,000 or more acre farm went up for sale here, and a guy named Dennis Prasad bought it out of Tampa Bay. Just showed up in our industry, and now he's going to breed some horses because he saw the land and just had to have it for no other reason than that. You go to the horse sales, and it's viral. When these horses are moving through the ring rapidly all day long, and I find a horse sale is exciting, maybe more exciting than a horse race. I always have.
Right.
And those experiences bring people in. So I don't accept the premise that everything's terrible. I would go with we are an evolving industry, and you better be evolving with it, which is why all of us have to be more creative with where do our resources come from, how do we spend them, and you know, emphasize that growth mindset rather than to just keep to you know, the static mindset.
Nadja, why don't you chime in and wrap up this topic here?
Definitely, just to build on everyone else's thoughts, we're certainly working on promoting and developing owners, how we can get more interest, customer acquisition. You've seen in New York, especially NYRA, partnering with sports books to see if we can get our product placed through the Caesars and the FanDuels, and of course, wider outlets that spend more money to acquire customers. But if they can have easier access to viewing our races, we can matriculate and grow more fans. With that organization, that we've been fortunate enough to have the Belmont Stakes in Saratoga while there's redevelopment going on at Belmont Park. We've held a brunch. Of course, this year we'll do so again next year, and built around a New York showcase day, all New York bred races on the day, so we can get that increased exposure and to ensure. And you have the yearling sales in August. We're always looking to build and promote the program, and it all starts with, you know, getting ourselves out there, as Steve and Chauncey mentioned, that we just want that additional exposure, and that will grow into interest And of course, as Roger mentioned, people wanting to participate and buy thoroughbreds and be a part of our sport.
Great. Well, we've run a little bit long, guys, but this is a great topic to talk about. We're going to break away here for just a second for our Q&A session. We've got a few questions in the queue, and let's hear from our Q&A sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds. Gives me a second to go through these questions, and then we'll be right back. So appreciate all the input. Let's go ahead and hear from our Q&A sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds.
How do you become the gold standard in racing partnerships? One horse, one partner, one victory at a time. Congratulations to all our partners who have made West Point the gold standard for the last 3 decades.
Okay, thank you, West Point. So first question, how long after a race does it take to receive a breeder incentive in Kentucky? Chauncey, and I think we go around the horn and just ask everyone, when do you pay out your breeder awards? Chauncey?
I'd have to defer that to, if that individual would share their contact information with you folks, I'll get them an answer from Drew Connors, since
Very
we
good.
don't run the KBIF program.
Okay. Anybody else? Roger, how often do you do it? And cricket?
In a Louisiana bred race, it's 30 days following the end of the race. An open race is 60. No, excuse me. A Louisiana bred race is 60 days following the race. An open race is 30 days following the end of the meet.
Okay.
We pay between 30 and 45 days from the date of the race.
Okay.
Our awards are
Steve?
distributed. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
TBOA runs checks the first week of every month.
Okay. New York?
We distribute our awards quarterly. So at the end of each financial quarter, checks are sent out to the winning breeders.
Very good. Okay. Here's a question that I can answer. Does anyone have a table of the breeder and owner incentives by state? And the answer is yes. Go to Owner View and click on Incentives, and we have all the states listed there in alphabetical order.
Owner View is great. I'll give it a little plug, or say rah rah. We use it all the time, and
Great.
Good on the Jockey Club for doing it, because it was much needed.
Gary's very happy to answer that question.
And it's all free, just so anybody in the audience that wants to know. You don't have to register to use it. Everything on that website is free. So here's a question from the UK. Could the reps indicate how easy for overseas investors to make use of an investment vehicle which could be best suited for an overseas investor? So do all vehicles need a resident rep company rep in the state or US, for example, the United Kingdom? So here's somebody that wants to invest here. How does he go about doing that? Who wants to grab that one?
It's pretty much open here in Louisiana. I mean, all you have to do, yes, the horse would have to be here in the state, and the horse would have to either be produced here, or the mare has to be here and whatnot. But you can go to our magazine or our website, and there's a list of maybe a dozen or so farms that you can call in and speak with them about possibly investing in a mare or a stallion or a foal here in Louisiana.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the answer is as simple as come buy a horse.
Yeah, that's right. You don't need there'll plenty of people that'll volunteer to be your resident or company representative, but no, you don't need that to participate. A lot of people, for tax purposes, so they won't get double taxed in whatever country that they're coming from, will set up some sort of LLC, but you can get licensed here to own a horse. The Breeders' Incentive Fund also does pay internationally.
Okay. I think we talked about this, but let's ask it again from a breeder perspective. Do you have a breed back rule if I bring a mare into your state? Do I need to breed back to one of your state stallions? So go ahead. Who wants to jump in there first?
Yes, we do. That has been beginning once again in 2025. That is true.
Okay.
We do not currently, but it's under discussion. We are, as you can see from the stallion numbers in Maryland, really needing to focus on stallions. And I did neglect to mention that we do have a 2-tiered bonus system starting next year for Maryland sired horses getting a little more money, just like is happening in the other states. But we have not done that yet. And so I think, there may be breed back considerations here in the future.
Okay. Florida breed back rule?
No breed back rule, no residency requirement other than the full drops in Florida. We make it as easy as possible.
Okay. And Nadia, you had mentioned something about buying a mare at the sale and having it come into New York and being able to register that foal. Can you talk about that again?
Correct. So that's the easiest way if you don't want to be a part or be subject to the breed back rule, is purchasing a mare and foal at public auction for 50,000 or more, and then of course, boarding in New York 15 days post sale. You would not then have to submit to our breed back rule, and you'd be free to breed to any stallion in North America or anywhere in the world for the next breeding season. And going forward, you'd be automatically qualified to be a resident mare.
Okay. Here's a question about state incentive monies. How secure would you say that your incentive monies are from your state governments deciding to use those funds for other purposes? And I'll add to that, in our economics of the sport, that did come up, and the panel pretty much decided and said that they were concerned about that at first when there was added money coming from either slots or from historical racing, but the history is showing that that's not been at risk in most states. So anybody want to take that one?
I think it's incumbent on me. I pounded on certainty, and I talked about our program here in Florida enough. So I think maybe I should first handle that. We've got to be offering certainty, and so when we have these programs and incentives, they've got to be around for a long enough time to matter and be relied upon. The question is fair. You're only as good as long as those will last. So we have to maintain those very, very strong relationships at the state capitol and elsewhere. Here in Florida, we work overtime with our media, with our personal relationships, with our Tallahassee presence. We work overtime every day to maintain those relationships. And here in Florida, do they like us? They love us. And that's because we're good citizens, and we maintain that presence, and that is everything.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? I
have a slightly different perspective in that Maryland's legislature is becoming more and more urban, and they like us, but as administrations change, and key legislators, we have to be accountable every year because they are always looking for money, as most legislatures are. In fact, Maryland we're headed into a significant deficit year next year, and we're going to be under a lot of scrutiny. They want to know that we are using the money effectively, and I feel pressure every year. And the politics of it, just as Steve pointed out, it's become so important in our industry, so much more critical than it was when I first started anyway.
Okay.
I think on a day of our national election, Steve gave the perfect political answer.
Right. Well done.
Correct.
All right. So I want to wrap things up with one more question that I'm just going to throw out. So name a horse from your state in 2024 that has had great success at the races. Chauncey, this should be pretty easy for you.
I got there's lots. Ramatuelle, Torpedo Anna. I mean, there's and on and on and on. We're lucky.
Right, you're absolutely right. Steve, how about Florida bred?
We've got lots to pick from. I'll just Arthur's Ride won the Whitney. Ran the Breeders' Cup the other day. Ben Tornado ran his eyeballs out in the sprint the other day. We were really proud of him. Rated by Merit, I mentioned earlier. I think he's got the highest buyer figure so far this year by a 2-year-old, so we're pretty pumped about him for a Derby horse, maybe.
Okay.
I can keep
going.
That's good
just
enough.
Name one. You can go on.
Okay.
Naja, how about New York bred?
Sure, I'll talk about Miami Squeeze, New York bred mare. She's definitely won the 8 bells, also finished second in the Charlestown Oaks, as well as second in the Raven Run at Lexington and Keeneland. So a great
Yeah.
year for her.
Okay, cricket, Maryland bred.
Well, I have to say post time. I mean, post time
Post
ran
time.
really well in the Breeders' Cup, ran well all summer. You know, we had a couple of good showings with Maryland Breds at Saratoga. Line Frame was up there. So, you know, we
Okay.
don't have as many as everybody, but we've got some good ones.
Okay, Roger, Louisiana. There's got to be a star guitar out there that's running well.
Well, there is a star guitar that's running well. There's several Louisiana breds that have done well in graded stake races this year, but I think without a doubt, it's got to be Free Like a Girl. Free Like a Girl, they bought the mama in full for $500. She sold at sale for $5,200, and she's made $1,979,000 winning
Wow.
stake races all over the country. So
Nice
That's
story.
great.
Good story.
Great story. Hey, so that wraps up our Q&A, and just wanted to let everybody know in the audience, if you have any follow-up questions for our panelists, you can see on the screen, we've got their names, their email addresses. You don't have to jot all this down because we're going to have the recorded version of this entire panel up later this week, and you can come back to the screen. So, you know, feel free to contact any of the representatives with questions you may have about their program. Yeah, I'd like to thank our speakers, Cricket, Chauncey, Naja, Roger, Steve. Really appreciate your taking the time. We've been here for an hour and 23 minutes. Really do appreciate your taking the time and sharing your insights on your programs with us.
enjoyed it.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for all you
Thank
do.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you. So
Gary.
I'd like to also thank the audience for being here, because without owners, we just simply don't have a sport. So
You're
we'll
here.
be back in December with one more panel for 2024. So until then, we wish you all well, and we hope you visit the Winter Circle and you visit it often. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.